There's a recording, a phone tap made by the Portuguese police in the days following the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. In it, a panicked woman, Kate McCann, calls her own mother and through her tears says a sentence that should never have been heard. Gerry has done something terrible. This call is not a theory. It's not an internet rumor. It is the centerpiece of a puzzle that the media and the McCanns themselves have tried to dismantle for over a decade. They told you the sentence was taken out of context, that it was just a mother venting about her husband's negligence. They lied. That sentence wasn't about leaving the children alone. It was about what happened after. Madeleine was already dead. And the proof of this is hidden in the details of that night. Details that were always there, but that we've been trained to ignore. The story we were told is almost a twisted fairy tale. It begins in a paradise, Praia da Luz, Portugal, a holiday resort where danger seems like a distant fiction. At the heart of the story, we have the perfect characters, Kate and Gerry McCann, two successful, educated British doctors, the image of the ideal couple, and of course the princess of the tale, Madeleine, a 3-year-old girl with unmistakable eyes, a face that would become one of the most recognized on the planet. The official narrative is simple, almost rehearsed. On the night of May 3, 2007, the doctor parents are dining with friends at a tapas restaurant, just 50 meters from the apartment where their 3 young children are sleeping. They feel safe. They've set up a rotation system to check on the children, a decision that the entire world would later judge with the ferocity of a tribunal. At 10 o'clock at night, the fairy tale shatters. Kate McCann goes to check on her children and finds Madeleine's bed empty. The bedroom window open. Panic sets in. The frantic search begins, first with friends, then with resort staff, then with the police. Paradise transforms into a crime scene. The world watches horrified. Millions in donations pour in. Celebrities like David Beckham and J.K. Rowling plead for help. Madeleine's face is everywhere. The story is clear. An innocent child was abducted from her bed by a monster who came through the window. The perfect family was destroyed by an unforeseeable tragedy. This is the story they sold us. The polished version, packaged for the media. The story that needed to be true for the world to keep making sense. This is the story that went around the world. And speaking of the world, I'm curious. What time is it where you're watching from? Leave a comment below. It's always fascinating to see how our community of investigators is spread across every corner of the globe, united in the search for truth, no matter the time zone. Now, let's get back to the case, because it's right there in the story everyone accepted that the biggest lie of all is hiding. But what if this is all a sham? What if the narrative of the perfect family and the mysterious abduction is just a facade, a smokescreen to cover up a much darker domestic secret? The thesis of this video is brutally simple. There was no abduction. No one came in through the window. Madeleine McCann died inside that apartment that night in a tragic accident. And what followed was not a desperate search, but the most complex and successful cover-up operation in modern criminal history, orchestrated by 2 doctors who used their intelligence and influence not to find their daughter, but to hide her body. Kate's call to her mother wasn't a slip-up. It was a crack in the armor. The moment when the truth, suffocated by panic and guilt, tried to escape. The terrible thing Gerry did wasn't leaving his daughter alone. It was the decision he made in the minutes following her death. A decision that set in motion a web of lies that has deceived the world for over a decade. But to prove this was a cover-up, we first need to demolish the story they told. And the demolition begins at the crime scene, a place with secrets that go far beyond a simple open window. Secrets that the police themselves at first failed to see. The crime scene is the starting point of any investigation. It is the sanctuary of truth, where physical evidence tells a silent story, immune to lies and manipulation. In Madeleine McCann's case, the crime scene not only fails to support the story of an abduction, it actively destroys it. They said an abductor entered through the children's bedroom window. But the evidence shows something different. The window, according to forensics, had no signs of forced entry. The external shutters were lifted, and the glass window was opened from the inside. For this to happen, the abductor would have needed the skills of a contortionist, reaching the latch through a tiny gap without leaving a single fingerprint, a strand of hair, or a fiber of clothing. A forensic ghost, They said the abductor left through the front door carrying a 3-year-old child, but the front door, according to the McCanns themselves, was locked. They unlocked it when they returned. So the abductor would have had to enter through the window, grab the child in the dark, walk through the apartment, and exit through the back patio door, a door that conveniently was unlocked. The problem is that this back door opened onto a common area, visible from the restaurant where the parents and their friends were sitting. The abductor would have had to pass with the child unseen, just a few meters from the group. The official story asks us to believe in a criminal who is both an invisible acrobat and an idiot who chooses the riskiest escape route possible. The crime scene doesn't scream abduction, it whispers staged. If the physical evidence is a puzzle with missing pieces, the human evidence is a theater of contradictions. The statements from the McCanns and their friends, the so-called Tapa 7, should have been the solid foundation of the investigation. Instead, they became a swamp of inconsistencies. Let's start with the dinner contradiction. The group claimed to have a system of checking on the children every 30 minutes, but the records and their own statements show a mess. Gerry McCann says he checked on the children around 9:05 p.m. A friend, Matthew Oldfield, was supposed to check at 9:30 p.m., but he only glanced through the McCann's bedroom door, saw nothing, and went back. He did not confirm if Madeleine was there. The next check only happens at 10:00 p.m. when Kate raises the alarm. The infallible security system had a gap of nearly an hour, exactly in the time window when the supposed abduction would have occurred. Then, we have the phantom sighting. A friend from the group, Jane Tanner, claimed to have seen a man carrying a child around 9:15 p.m., walking away from the apartment. This became the main alibi, the proof that an abductor was there. For years, this was the focus of the investigation. The problem, years later, a British tourist proved that he was the man Jane Tanner saw. He was just carrying his own sleeping daughter, back from the resort's daycare. The main pillar of the abduction theory wasn't a pillar. It was smoke. With Jane Tanner's sighting debunked, there is not a single credible eyewitness of an abductor that night. No one. And finally, the irregular checks. Gerry's statement about his 9:05 p.m. visit is particularly strange. He says he entered the room, saw the children, and upon leaving left the bedroom door ajar. He claims to be certain of this. But when Kate enters at 10:00 p.m., she says the door was wide open, much more than Gerry had left it. Someone would have had to move the door. The abductor? Why? Why would a criminal in the middle of a silent abduction bother to open the bedroom door wider? The open door, just like the window, seems less like the action of an intruder and more like a detail planted to build a narrative. Their story simply doesn't add up. What do you think is the most glaring inconsistency so far? The statement about the window or the confusing dinner timelines? Leave your investigator's opinion in the comments below. The theories from this community often see what others ignore. When logic fails and testimonies contradict each other, modern investigation turns to silent heroes, witnesses who cannot lie, who cannot be intimidated. Science. And in the McCann case, science arrived in the form of 2 Springer Spaniels, Eddie and Keela, brought from England. Eddie was a dog trained to detect the scent of human cadavers. Keela was trained to detect traces of blood, even if they had been cleaned. What they found demolished the official narrative. Inside apartment 5A, weeks after the disappearance, Eddie gave a positive alert for the scent of a corpse in several locations. Behind the sofa in the living room, and most damningly in the parents' bedroom, near the wardrobe. Keela, the blood dog, also alerted on the floor of the same room. Science was saying that there had been death and blood in that apartment, but the most devastating discovery came later. The dogs were taken to inspect the car the McCanns had rented 25 days after. Madeleine disappeared. A Renault Scenic. Inside the trunk and near the key in the ignition, Eddie alerted again unequivocally to the scent of a corpse. Keela also found traces of blood in the trunk. Samples were collected from these locations and sent to a top forensic laboratory in the UK. The result was the atomic bomb of the case. The DNA found in the trunk of the car was a match to Madeleine McCann's DNA. The scent of a corpse and Madeleine's DNA were found in a car rented almost a month after she was supposedly abducted by a stranger. There is no innocent explanation for this. There is no way an abductor could have put Madeleine's body in her parents' car weeks later. The only logical explanation is that Madeleine's body was in that car. And the only people who had access to that car were Kate and Gerry McCann. Science was screaming that a body had been there. In the room, in the car, a truth that cannot be ignored. So if the abduction story is a sham, what really happened that night? To answer that, we need to do what the police never did. Reconstruct the night of the crime based on evidence, not fiction. Forget the story of the phantom abductor. Forget the open window. To understand what really happened, we need to go back inside that apartment and follow the trail of evidence, not words. The night of May 3rd, 2007, likely happened like this. The children are restless. The parents want a quiet evening with their friends. Perhaps one of the children, or all of them, was given a mild sedative to help them sleep. A practice that, while controversial, is not unheard of among doctor parents on vacation. Madeleine, for some reason, a wrong dose, an allergic reaction, an unknown pre-existing condition, doesn't wake up. The first real check of the night is Gerry's. Around 9:05 p.m., he enters the room. He sees the twins sleeping, but Madeleine is motionless. Too quiet. He approaches, touches her. She's cold. There's no breath. Cold, absolute panic takes over. He's a doctor. He knows the difference between deep sleep and death. In that moment, his world splits into two realities. In the first, he runs outside, screams for help, calls an ambulance, and faces the consequences of his actions. An investigation into negligence, the possibility of having administered a sedative, the loss of his medical license, the scandal, the ruin of his career and reputation. The perfect family image would be shattered forever. In the second reality, he can try to control the situation. He can hide what happened. He is an intelligent man, used to being in control, to solving problems. The accidental death of his daughter is a problem to be solved. The first decision is the most crucial: tell no one. He returns to the dinner table, his face a mask of normality, hell burning inside him. He needs time. He needs to think. The check by his friend Matthew Oldfield at 9:30 p.m. is a sham. Gerry knows he won't actually go into the room. The next person to go is Kate at 10:01 p.m. That's enough time. The plan begins to form. The body needs to disappear. The story of an abduction needs to be created. When Kate enters the room at 10:00 p.m., the scene is already set. The window is open. The curtain is blowing. The bed is empty. Her scream is real, but perhaps not of surprise, but of horror at seeing her husband's plan in action. Or maybe Gerry only told her at that moment, forcing her to become an accomplice. The call to her mother, days later, is the echo of this moment. Gerry has done something terrible. He didn't just fail to protect his daughter, he chose the path of lies, dragging the entire family into an abyss. What follows is theater. The frantic search, the appeals to the media. Every action is not to find Madeleine, but to solidify the abduction story. The body in the meantime is hidden. Maybe in a closet, maybe wrapped in a blanket. The sniffer dogs detected the scent of a corpse behind the sofa and in the parents' wardrobe. The body was there, waiting. Days later, when the dust settles and they get a rental car, the body is moved, transported in the trunk of that Renault Scenic to its final resting place. A place that only Kate and Gerry McCann know. What leads two people to do something so monstrous? The answer isn't pure evil. It's a toxic mix of panic, guilt, and above all, narcissism. The fear of the consequences became greater than the pain of the loss. For a doctor, a figure of authority and prestige, admitting such a catastrophic failure, negligence resulting in the death of his own daughter, is unthinkable. The career, the social status, the admiration of the community, all would be annihilated. Self-preservation is the strongest human instinct. Faced with the choice between total ruin and a desperate lie, they chose the lie. They built a fortress of denial around themselves, and the search for Madeleine became the wall of that fortress. As long as they were the grieving parents, they couldn't be the negligent parents. The public persona became the perfect shield. They weren't just deceiving the world, they were perhaps trying to deceive themselves, repeating the lie so many times until it became the only truth they could bear. So far, does this reconstruction of events seem more plausible than the story of a phantom abductor? Does the psychology of fear and self-preservation better explain their actions than the pain of grief? Tell me in the comments if the pieces are starting to fit for you. Because the evidence I'm about to show you now is not a theory. It's the proof that seals this case. The Portuguese police, led by investigator Gonçalo Amaral, had all these pieces, the contradictions, the lack of evidence of an abduction, the sniffer dogs. But they needed definitive proof, the so-called smoking gun, and they found it. The definitive proof is not the DNA in the car, although that is devastating. The definitive proof is something much more fundamental, which was conveniently ignored by the British media and the McCanns lawyers. It's the record of Gerry McCann's phone calls. In the case files, there is a crucial detail. On the morning after the disappearance, May 4th, while the world believed he was a desperate father searching for his abducted daughter, Gerry McCann made a series of calls. He didn't call hospitals. He didn't call the police for updates. He called his bank. He called his insurance company. And most importantly, he called a lawyer specializing in criminal law. Think about it. Your 3-year-old daughter has been missing for just a few hours. The world is collapsing, and your priority is to call a criminal lawyer. Innocent people, victims of a crime, don't do that. Guilty people, who know they are about to become the center of a criminal investigation, do. This is not an interpretation. It is a documented fact. It is the action of a man who is not thinking like a victim, but like a suspect. A man who is not managing an abduction crisis, but a cover-up crisis. The call to the criminal lawyer in those first hours is the silent confession. It is the piece that connects the accidental death to the conscious decision to lie. It is the proof that from the very beginning, Gerry McCann knew that the crime to be investigated was not an abduction, but a death that happened under his roof and under his responsibility. With the proof on the table, the question changes. It's no longer what happened to Madeleine. Doubt who helped hide the truth. The answer involves a conspiracy much larger than just a panicked couple. It involves the power of an entire state. Truth has incredible power, but it is not invincible. It can be silenced. And in the case of Madeleine McCann, the truth was not just silenced. It was actively crushed by a system that decided the reputation of a country and the image of an influential British couple were more important than justice for a dead child. When the Portuguese police, led by Gonçalo Amaral, put the pieces together, the staged crime scene, the contradictory statements, the sniffer dogs, the DNA in the car, the suspicious phone calls, they did what any police force would do. They declared Kate and Gerry McCann arguidos, the Portuguese term for formal suspects. The investigation was on the right track. The truth was about to explode, and that's when the conspiracy began. The reaction from the British government was immediate and overwhelming. The then Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, and his ambassador to Portugal became directly involved in the case, not to help find a missing child, but to defend the McCanns. The diplomatic pressure on Portugal was immense. The British media, instead of investigating, launched a brutal campaign to discredit the Portuguese police, painting them as incompetent, lazy, and xenophobic. Because of the sniffer dog evidence, the consequence was a campaign to disqualify the work of Martin Grime, the dog's handler, one of the world's top experts. Because of the DNA found in the car, the consequence was an endless debate about the validity of low-level DNA samples, a distraction tactic to confuse the public. Because of the McCanns' suspect status, the consequence was the removal of Gonçalo Amaral from the case. The man who dared to follow the trail of truth was silenced. The system didn't want the truth. The truth was ugly, inconvenient. It would tarnish Portugal's image as a safe tourist destination and create a diplomatic incident with the United Kingdom. It was easier, cleaner, to embrace the fiction of the mysterious abductor. The investigation was closed. The McCanns were cleared for lack of evidence, and they returned to England as tragic heroes, victims of an incompetent foreign police force. The lie won, but this victory came at a devastating human cost. The price of truth was paid by those who refused to stay silent. Gonçalo Amaral, the detective who led the investigation, had his career destroyed. He wrote a book, Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, detailing the evidence he found. In response, the McCanns sued him, dragging him through a legal battle that lasted nearly a decade, trying to silence him and bankrupt him. He became the scapegoat, the villain of the story. Who contradicted the McCanns' version were intimidated or ignored. People who lived in Praia da Luz and who suspected the couple from the beginning were labeled as cruel gossips. The truth became radioactive. To touch it meant risking your reputation, your career, your peace. The system sent a clear message to everyone. Stay silent. Let the story die. It's infuriating. It's frustrating. And that's why this channel exists. If you believe these stories of cover-ups need to be told, that the truth cannot be buried by power and money, then be part of this mission. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every subscription is a vote of confidence and a sign that we are not alone in this search. In the end, the moral verdict is clear. Despite a body of evidence that overwhelmingly points to an accidental death followed by a cover-up, the Madeleine McCann case remains officially unsolved. Justice was never served, not for a lack of clues, but for a lack of will. The system chose to protect the powerful instead of defending the innocent. The narrative of a German super-kidnapper, Christian Bruckner, which emerged years later, seems more like a desperate attempt to give the public a new villain. A convenient closure that doesn't disturb the status quo and keeps the McCanns in the role of victims. But this theory, like the original abduction one, is fragile and lacks concrete evidence directly connecting it to Madeleine's disappearance. It's just another smokescreen. The system won. Justice was buried along with Madeleine's body. But in the midst of all this darkness, one final question remains, the most personal of all. What does this terrible story teach us about our own world? And what do we do with this inconvenient truth? What does this terrible story teach us about our world? It teaches us that justice is not blind. It has a price. And that sometimes the truth is just a negotiable commodity in the marketplace of power and influence. My conviction, after years of analyzing every piece of this puzzle, is clear and painful. Madeleine McCann was not the victim of a monster who crept through the night. She was the victim of a series of tragic decisions, beginning with negligence and ending with arrogance. What haunts me is not the mystery of what happened to her, but the clarity of what happened afterward. A conspiracy of silence orchestrated by fear and ego, and validated by a system that preferred a comfortable lie to an inconvenient truth. The greatest tragedy of this case is not the crime, but the cover-up. And now, after we've gone through all of this together, I need to know what this story has awakened in you. Use the comments below not to debate, but to bear witness. Witness your outrage. Leave a word, a sentence that shows we have not forgotten, and we do not accept the silence. I will read every comment, because in a world that wants us to be quiet, our collective voice is the only weapon we have, and this fight against silence doesn't end here. The same dynamics of power, influence, and secrets we saw in Portugal are repeated in an infamous case in the United States. In our next documentary, we will investigate how the wealth and influence of the Ramsey family may have buried the truth along with their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenet. To continue on this mission with me, subscribe and turn on notifications. The search for truth cannot stop. Until next time, remember, the truth doesn't need you to believe in it. It only needs you not to forget it.